Hi everyone, today is Monday, June 8th, and this week we will be taking our end of year ELA assessment and our end of year math assessment. So we have a lot of tests that we need to take this week, but after this week, your work will be really light and fun. So we just need to get through this week before the end of the school year. With that being said, I'm going to be posting reviews that you need to take, which will count just toward your regular DOL grades. And then later in the week, we will be taking assessments, which count for a lot of points, and they are super important. So today I'll be going over how to answer questions just like you will this week on your assessments. So I'll be reading a short story and then answering multiple choice questions as well as an open-ended question. This is just meant to help you so you know how to answer these questions when it's your turn. Okay. The real McCoy. Have you ever heard anyone say that something is the real McCoy? That means it is the real thing. When you want the real McCoy, you are saying that you want something good. This saying came about because of Elijah McCoy. He was an amazing inventor. Elijah McCoy was born in Canada in 1843. His parents were former slaves. They had fled Kentucky for Canada. When Elijah was 3 years old, his family moved back to the United States and settled in Michigan. Elijah's parents knew he was very smart. He liked working with engines. They wanted him to get a good education, so he studied engineering in Scotland. He was 15 years old at the time. He returned to the United States to look for a job in his field. He dreamed of being in charge of a powerful train. Unfortunately, the only job he could get was feeding wood into train furnaces. He also oiled the engine, the wheels, and many other train parts. He didn't mind performing these tasks. Working around trains was great. If he hadn't found a job, he was willing to donate his time and work as a volunteer. And I see volunteers underlined, so I am going to predict one of our questions is going to be about the word volunteer. Like all machines, train parts have to be oiled to prevent overheating. In the middle of the 1800s, train parts had to be stopped whenever they needed oiling. This oiling had to be done by hand, and it had to take place several times a day. All of this oiling was very boring. A lot of time and money was wasted because of these oil stops. Moreover, if too much oil was used, the machine would stall. McCoy knew there had to be a way to feed oil to a machine while it was still running. McCoy began thinking about how to transform the way train parts were oiled. He made the most of his training. After a few years, he was able to identify and solve the problems of engine lubrication and overheating. He invented the first locomotive lubricator. It was ready in June 1872. McCoy's invention was fairly simple. He made a small cup with a valve attached to it. Oil dripped slowly from the cup onto the surface of moving parts. He showed railroad workers how to use the cups. McCoy's invention proved to be very useful. The cups were being used everywhere. When a worker saw a new piece of machinery, they would ask if it was a real McCoy. Soon, people everywhere were using this saying. Over the next 4 decades of his life, Elijah McCoy continued to be a very active inventor. With hard work, he obtained over 50 patents for his creations. His first invention, however, proved to be his most famous. McCoy didn't think he was special in any way. Until his death in 1929, he encouraged young people to use their imaginations to solve problems. Everyone should be grateful for the work of Elijah McCoy. So now after you read a short story, there comes a series of questions, and they're normally multiple choice and open-ended. I'm going to show you how to respond to these questions. Question 1. What is the main idea of this passage? I'm thinking back to the class, our 4th grade class, and I'm thinking about what main idea means. I know main idea is what the story was mostly about. So instead of just guessing A, B, C, or D, I'm going to try my best to solve this problem. What is the main idea of this passage? I'm going to read all of my options. A, Elijah McCoy's parents were former slaves. Well, I know that, but was that what the passage was mostly about? No way. There was only about one sentence that talked about his parents. So I know it can't be A. Let's see. Oh no, I'm sorry, I can't. It's okay. B, Elijah McCoy's job was to put wood into train furnaces. Well, I know he did that as his first job on a train, but I don't think that's what the story was mostly about. C, Elijah McCoy was a volunteer. So I know that was said, but that wasn't what the story was mostly about. So through a process of elimination, I was able to tell that D was the answer, but let me just read it to double check. Elijah McCoy made an invention. That's supposed to say an invention, but that says invitation. Invention that changed how trains were oiled. So that makes perfect sense. That's what the story was mostly about. He invented how trains were now oiled. Now for 1B, which sentence below best supports your answer to part A? So our answer was Elijah McCoy made an invention that changed how trains were oiled. And now I'll read all possible answers. A, his parents were former slaves. They had fled Kentucky for Canada. Does that support our answer that he made a new invention about oiling trains? No way. B, he invented the first locomotive lubricator. Wow. So that does support that he made a new invention because that was his invention, the locomotive lubricator. But I'm not going to just circle it and move on. Let's try the other two answers. C, if he hadn't found a job, he was willing to donate his time and work as a volunteer. I don't think him as a volunteer really supports that he made an invention and helped trains with their oil. I don't think that's the best supporting answer. And D, unfortunately, the only job he could get was feeding wood into train furnaces. So that does not support his invention. The only one that supports letter D from 1A is B. He invented the first locomotive lubricator. So process of elimination, I tried all the answers and I took my best answer. 2. In paragraph 4, what does the word volunteer mean? So before going back into the text, I'm going to read all 4 answers. A, a person who works without pay. B, the engine in a train. C, a person who drives a train. Or D, the oil used to lubricate train parts. So let's go back and read that sentence. Paragraph 4. Working around trains was great. If he hadn't found a job, he was willing to donate his time and work as a volunteer. So if you look at B, if you're working as a volunteer, you can't work as an engine. That doesn't make sense. And D, you can't, if you work as a volunteer, that doesn't mean you're working as oil. Okay? So it either has to be A or C. Is it a person who works without pay or a person who drives the train? Well, he never talked about driving the train. He talked about how he would work as a volunteer, so it makes me think it has to be a person who works without pay. 3. What were the results of McCoy's invention? A, trains no longer needed oil. B, trains could run longer. C, train engines stalled. Or D, trains could be oiled without having to stop. Well, let's look back in the text. If you look at paragraph 7, it says, McCoy's invention was fairly simple. He made a small cup with a valve attached to it. Oil dripped slowly from the cup onto the surface of moving parts. He showed railroad workers how to use the cup. So I know it can't be A because it's talking about oil. It involves oil. B, trains could run longer. I don't think that was true. It didn't mention that. C, train engines stalled, so that means they stopped. And that's not true. He was preventing that from happening. So it has to be D. Trains could be oiled without having to stop. And that's exactly what the result was. The cup with the valve could oil the train while the train was moving. 3B. Which sentence below supports your answer to part A? So what supports that trains could be oiled without having to stop? A. The oiling had to be done by hand and it takes place several times a day. So that was before his invention. It can't be A. B. McCoy knew there had to be a way to feed oil to a machine while it was still running. So that's supportive to his invention. C. Oil dripped slowly from the cup onto the surface of moving parts. Ooh, that also supports the answer of D from above. Or D, he invented the first locomotive lubricator. Okay. So, with that being said, the answer to 3A was trains could be oiled without having to stop. And that was a result of his invention. So I'm going to go with C, oil dripped slowly from the cup onto the surface of moving parts because that was the result. That was his invention. That's why they no longer had to stop the train and waste time, because now oil drips slowly from the cup onto the surface of moving parts. That was his invention. And now you're going to be asked to do a short... Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped one. In paragraph 9, the word active means A, rich, B, proud, C, slowly, D, busy. Let's go back to paragraph 9 and reread that. Over the next 4 decades of his life, Elijah McCoy continued to be a very active inventor. With hard work, he obtained over 50 patents for his creation. So he had a lot going on. So let's see. Was he rich? Never talked about his money. Was he proud? I'm sure he was proud, but does that fit best in our sentence from paragraph 9? Do you think active means slow? No, he definitely worked fast. Or D, busy. Well, if we go back to paragraph 9, it does say he was an active inventor. With hard work, he obtained over 50 patents for his creations. So it sounds like D would be our best bet. Then you're going to be asked to do a short response. And I wrote this, and you can listen to how I put this together. Write a short summary about what you learned. Use evidence from the text to support your summary. In the short story, The Real McCoy, notice I put them in quotation marks and I capitalize the real and McCoy. I learned that Elijah McCoy, ever since he was little, worked hard on fixing and improving trains. Elijah was willing to work as a volunteer to help fix trains, as said in paragraph 4. Working around trains was great. If he hadn't found a job, he was willing to donate his time and work as a volunteer. So right then and there, I am fully responding to the question because I'm using text evidence from the text to support my summary. I took that information from the story. Over his time working on and observing trains, Elijah came up with an amazing idea. McCoy knew there had to be a way to feed oil to a machine while it was still running. He made a small cup with a valve attached to it. Oil dripped slowly from the cup onto the surface of moving parts. He showed railroad workers how to use the cups. This proves that not only was McCoy a wonderful inventor, but he was a remarkable teacher as well. From feeding the train furnaces wood to inventing the first locomotive lubricator, McCoy became a part of history. So I went back into my story to find text evidence to help support my summary. I didn't just try to remember what the story was about, I went back. You can't be lazy and just avoid going back to the story. You have to go back to write your best answer. And notice I put the paragraph number. Okay, and make sure you complete the review because there will be a two-part test coming your way this week. Have a nice Monday.